In this video, we're going to learn how to use the functions COUNTIF, SUMIF, COUNTIFs, and SUMIFs. First, let's look at our COUNTIF. If you notice on the left-hand side of the screen, we have a listing of a bicycle inventory. Each one of our products, the category, the purchase cost, the selling price, and the supplier. So first, we're going to count the number of items for each product category. So in order to do this, I'm going to click in cell I4, and I'm going to use the function COUNTIF. I like using the paste function dialog box, so to do that, I'm going to click on Formulas. Then I'm going to go to More Functions, and the statistical category, and then scroll down until I see COUNTIF. If you don't know that it's under the statistical category, you can always click the Insert Function button. Under Selected Category, go to All. Of course, there are a lot of functions, and scroll until you see COUNTIF. As I said, there are a lot of functions there. COUNTIF gets you to the same place. Or you could even type the description in the description box. So where it says type brief description, COUNTIF, and it shows you the functions. So I'm going to open my COUNTIF, and notice I have two different arguments over here, the range and the criteria. So first, for the range, because I want to count the category, I'm going to count column A. And since I don't want to count the word product category, I'm going to start from A4. So in the range, I'm going to select the range A4 all the way down to A27. Now, before I leave this box, before I click away, I'm going to hit my F4 key. For you Mac users, that is Command T, but hitting the F4 key on my keyboard changes that to an absolute reference. If I don't do that, if I copy that formula down to I5, it'll search the range A5 to A28, and then further on A6 to A29, and so on. We always wanted to search that exact same range when we copy the formula down column I, so we're going to make the range an absolute reference. Now, in the criteria box, I'm just going to click on cell H4. I could type the word leisure, but if I type the word leisure, I would have to type 5 different formulas. By using H4, when I copy it down, it'll change it to H5, H6, H7. If I use the dollar signs here, I'll get a count for only leisure in each one of the 5 cells. So I always want to count the same range, but I want to count a different criteria each time. So I'm not going to use the dollar signs for H4. Now I'm going to click OK. I have 7. Now all I have to do is drag the fill handle down, or I can even double click the fill handle, and now I have a count of the number of items for each product category. Now as we go on, this worksheet is going to get a little bit more difficult to work with because I've put things off to the right. So I'm constantly going to be scrolling right and left, which is going to be very distracting. So to make it easier to work with this worksheet right now, I am going to click in cell H1, and I'm going to click the View tab. In the window group, I'm going to click Freeze Panes, and then I'm going to click Freeze Panes. So it'll put a freeze to the left and above where I am currently, because I'm in row 1, there's no above, so it'll freeze columns A through G. So freeze panes and freeze panes. Now when I scroll right, notice how H through K are now hidden and I only see G and L. This is just going to make this a lot easier to work with, so I can see my formulas as well as see my listing at the same time. So now, very similar, I'm going to use a SUMIF. So now that I've frozen my panes, I can see both my list and my formulas. So Now I'm going to enter my SUMIF formula in cell M4. So I'm going to click the Formulas tab. Unfortunately, SUMIF is under Math and Trig, not under Statistical, but if you can't find it, you can always go to the Insert function and either search for it or go into the All category. But I'm going to click Math and Trig and scroll down until I see SUMIF. So first it's going to ask for the range for the criteria and then the range to sum. So the range for my criteria, because I'm looking at the product category, is going to be column A. So in my range, I'm going to select the range A4 all the way down to A27, and I'm not going to forget to use those dollar signs. So function F4 means that I'm always searching the exact same range. Now in the criteria, I'm going to click on cell L4, the leisure. So without the dollar signs, as I copy that down, it'll change it to mountain, road, and children, but always search the exact same range. Now, because this is a SUMIF, I'm not counting, I have a different range to sum. I want to sum the total purchase cost. So the total purchase cost is going to be in column C. If I wanted the total of the selling price, I would do column D. Now I have to make sure that the range and the sum range have exactly the same number of rows, otherwise this is going to fail. So for my sum range, I'm going to click on cell C4 and select the range C4 all the way down to C27. Now before I click OK, just like the range, the sum range cannot change. As I copy this formula down column M, I always want to make sure that I sum exactly the same range. C4 to C27 does not change, so I'm going to use that F4 key on my keyboard. For you Mac users, it is Command T, and if you can't find it on your keyboard, you can always just type in the dollar signs. So now I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to use the fill handle to copy this down to hybrid. And now I have summed up the total purchase cost for each one of my product categories. Now we're going to move on to COUNTIFs. So using COUNTIFs, I'm going to have two different criteria. So I'm going to scroll to the right until my COUNTIFs is right at my freeze. Then I'm going to click in cell R4 and I'm going to find the function COUNTIFs. So clicking the Formulas tab, I'm going to go to More Functions, Statistical, and scroll down until I see COUNTIFs. So with COUNTIFs, it'll just keep going. You can have more than two criteria and more than two criteria ranges. You can have several of them. As you fill in the criteria 1, it'll give you criteria 2. As you fill in criteria 2, it'll give you a box for criteria 3. So let's take a look at the COUNTIFs. So with our COUNTIFs, first I want to count whether it's the product category, whether it's leisure or mountain. Then I want to count the supplier. So first I'm going to count column A, being that it matches column P. Then I'm going to count column E, being that it matches column Q. I hope that wasn't too complicated. So in criteria range 1, because the first thing I'm counting is the product category, I'm going to select the range A4 all the way down to A27, and just like I did before, I'm going to be very careful to turn that into an absolute cell reference, F4 or Command T, to make sure that I always count the exact same range, that as I copy it down, that range will not change. And in fact, if we copy this down all the way column R, we can see at the end, if we didn't put the dollar signs, we wouldn't even be counting anything anymore. So I'm going to click in criteria 1, and for criteria 1, I'm just going to click in cell P4. So it'll keep changing that from leisure down to mountain, down to road. Now I'm going to click in Criteria Range 2. Now I want to count the supplier. So for Criteria Range 2, I'm going to count column E. So I'm going to select the range E4 down to E27, and once again I'm not going to forget to turn those into absolute cell references with the dollar signs. I just press the F4 key. For you Mac users, Command T, or you can even type in the dollar signs. Now my second criteria, I'm going to click on cell Q4, and once again I don't want the dollar signs there, otherwise all my formulas would be for Simpson's bike supply. And notice in my dialog box I have an answer of 2, which tells me that at least I got an answer. I don't have an error message. Now I'm going to click OK. This is a lot of dragging, so I'm just going to double click the fill handle, and notice I now have a count of all of the items from each different category and each different supplier. Now I'm going to scroll a few columns to the right using a horizontal scroll bar, display column U at the freeze, and enter my formulas for the SUMIFs in column W. Now this time what I want to do is sum the total purchase cost, column C. If it said to sum the total selling price, I would sum column D, but I'm going to sum the total purchase cost for each combination of category and supplier. So I'm going to click in cell W4, and I'm going to click on the Formulas tab, Math and Trig, and scroll all the way down until I see my SUMIFs. Once again, if you don't remember it's in Math and Trig, you can always click on the Insert function and click the All category or search for it. So I'm going to click my SUMIFs, and now I have my sum range first. Then I have to put in my criteria ranges. So because I have my sum range is my purchase cost, my sum range is going to be column C. So I'm going to select the range C4 all the way down to C27, and make sure to use that F4 key or Command T for you Mac users, or just type in those dollar signs. It's very, very important, because otherwise the sum range will change as we copy it down the list. Now I'm going to click in Criteria Range 1 and scroll up. My first criteria range is going to be column A, the product category. So in Criteria Range 1, I'm going to select the range A4 down to A27, and also use my F4 key to make sure that as I copy that down column W, we're always checking the same criteria range. Now in Criteria 1, I'm going to click in cell U4. That one I don't want the dollar signs, because I want on every row, I want to check the different combination of category and supplier, but I always want to check through the same range. Now my criteria range 2 is going to be the supplier, because I'm combining category and supplier in this SUMIFs. So my criteria range 2, I'm going to select the range E4 down to E27, and once again, very important to use that F4 to put in those dollar signs, otherwise it's not going to work. And my criteria 2 is going to be V4. So I'm telling it to sum up column C as long as column A matches what's in column U and column V matches what's in column E. So I am going to click OK. Notice I get an answer, which is a very good sign. And now all I have to do is double click that fill handle, and I have the total purchase cost for each combination of category and supplier. Now this isn't required in your assignment, but I do want to show you something pretty neat. So I'm going to scroll to the right a few columns again, and I'm going to show you data validation, and then using data validation to use a SUMIF to calculate the total selling price. So data validation is going to allow us to choose a product category from a list. So first I want a listing of all the unique product categories. So I'm going to select the range A4 down to A27. I'm going to click my Home tab and click the copy icon. That's normally what I do. If you want, you can hover over it, right click, and choose copy as well. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll up and to the right and get it a little bit away from here. So maybe in column AF, I'm going to click cell AF1 and just click the paste icon. Now before clicking away, if you did click away, make sure you select this range in column AF. I'm going to click the Data tab, and then in the Data Tools group, there is a button called Remove Duplicates. So I'm going to click that button. Now I went a few columns away because I didn't want it to touch my original data. It's just going to delete all the data in column AF because it's not attached to any other data. And very important, I want to uncheck the button. My data has headers, otherwise I'm going to get leisure twice because this column does not have headers. Now I'm going to click OK, and now I have a listing of all of my unique product categories, which is 5. This is very, very useful if you have a long list. Now I'm going to scroll back to my data validation. So I'm going to click in cell Z4, and I'm going to click the Data tab once again, and in the Data Tools group, I'm going to find the button for data validation. I'm going to click the down arrow, and I'm going to choose data validation. Making sure that you're on the Settings tab. Instead of allowing any value, I'm going to tell Excel to only allow from a list. Now it's going to ask the source of the list, so I'm going to select the range AF1 down to AF5, that list that I just created of all of the unique product categories. Now all I have to do is click OK, and once I do, you see a little down arrow. Now this is important to do this before you input the formula, otherwise your formula will have an error message because right now no product category is chosen. Even though I've done the data validation, the cell is still empty. But notice when I click the down arrow, I can choose leisure, or I can choose children, or I can choose road. This is really cool. So now in column AA, I'm going to put in a SUMIF to calculate the sum of the total selling price given the product category. So I'm going to click back on my formulas, Math and Trig, and scroll down until I see SUMIF. So my range first is going to be the criteria range for my SUMIF. Since I'm using the product category, my range is going to be column A. So I'm going to select the range A4 down to A27, and I don't have to worry this time about the dollar signs because I'm not copying this formula. It's only going to stay in one cell. Now I'm going to scroll up. My criteria is going to be cell Z4, that data validation that I just input. And now my sum range is going to be column D because I want a total selling price, not a total purchase cost. So I'm going to select the range D4 down to D27. And if I was copying this formula, I'd have to worry about the dollar signs, but I'm only inputting the formula in one cell, and we can just keep changing the product category. So I do not have to worry about the dollar signs. Now I'm going to click OK, and now watch how cool this is. If you click in cell Z4, you can now change the category and have the total selling price update automatically.